On September 11, 2021, Gabby Petito, a 22-year-old aspiring travel vlogger on a cross-country road trip with her fiancé Brian Laudrie, was reported missing. Brian Laundrie returned home from the road trip and refused to answer questions and, within days, disappeared himself. And soon, disturbing information about the couple's relationship became public. What happened to Gabby, and what did Brian and his family know that they kept secret from the police? In July 2020, Brian asked Gabby to marry him, and she boasted about the proposal on Instagram. Gabby's mother, Nicole Schmidt, said by the time the pair went on their road trip in that summer of 2021, they had put their engagement on hold. Although they were still excited to be married, Brian and Gabby thought their relationship was moving too fast and wanted to slow things down. Brian and Gabby shared a love of travel, but struggled to afford their passion. The couple thought of ways to go on trips without breaking the bank. That's when Gabby came up with the idea to invest in a van, remodel it, and use it as their means of transportation and boarding on their next road trip. With their newly remodeled white 2012 Ford Transit van, the couple left Long Island, New York, on July 2, 2021. It was to be a cross-country drive, posting pictures from national parks and hot springs under the hashtag #VanLife. Throughout her and Brian's travels, Gabby kept in constant contact with her family. The couple seemed to be having a good time on their trip, and they posted pictures on social media of all the places they visited, including Canyonlands National Park, Mystic Hot Springs, and Monument Rocks. It wasn't until August that the first signs of trouble between Gabby and Brian would appear. On August 12, police officers in Moab, Utah, responded to a possible domestic violence call. The 911 caller told the dispatcher that they witnessed a man slapping a woman in the face outside the Moonflower Community Cooperative. As officers arrived at the scene, they came upon Brian and an hysterically crying Gabby.
Some personal issues.
It was a long day. We were camping, yes.
Gabby told the responding officers that she was the aggressor and slapped Brian across the face first. She told them that Brian also roughly grabbed her face to get her to calm down. Brian told the police that the emotional stress became too much for him and Gabby due to weeks of being in such close proximity. In their report, the Moab police wrote that the couple was in love, engaged to be married, and did not wish to press charges against each other. Still, as emotions were still high, the police ordered Brian to stay in a hotel overnight, and Gabby was to remain in the couple's van without the knowledge of Brian's location until the morning. Approximately 1 week later, on August 17, Brian flew back to Salt Lake City, Utah, to reunite with Gabby and continue their travels. A few days later, a vacationing couple from Louisiana witnessed Brian and Gabby in an altercation while dining at Mary Piglet's Tex-Mex restaurant. The witnesses said that Brian was visibly angry at Gabby, who was in tears. Brian left the restaurant several times and was rude to the hostess and their server. 2 weeks later, after the altercation at the restaurant, Brian returned home without Gabby. A few days later, the Laundrie family went on a spur-of-the-moment camping trip, even with their future daughter-in-law missing. On September 11, after Gabby's parents had gone several weeks without hearing from their daughter, her most recent Instagram post had been on August 25. They contacted the authorities and reported her as missing. Northport police officers went to the Laundrie family home that day and saw Gabby's Ford van parked in their driveway. Brian and his family were uncooperative with authorities from the start, and Brian refused to say a word about what had happened to Gabby. While Gabby's family and friends frantically searched the country for her, Brian remained safe and comfortable in his Northport, Florida home. It was around this time that Gabby's disappearance began to make national headlines. A woman came forward to Wyoming officials and informed them that her boyfriend had given a ride to a hitchhiking Brian Laundrie on August 29. Brian had told the woman that he'd been hiking for several days and that Gabby was alone in their van, updating her social media sites. The woman and her boyfriend told Brian that they were headed toward Jackson Hole, and immediately Brian began to freak out and asked to get out of the car. Later in the day, on August 29, another driver would pick up a hitchhiking Brian near the Jackson Dam, where he had been let out of the previous car. The person would take Brian to Spread Creek. At the Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming, a search began for Gabby, as this was her last known location. Gabby's family held a press conference begging Brian and his parents for information on their missing daughter. But Brian's family remained silent. On September 19, Gabby's remains were discovered in Wyoming. Medical examiners who performed her autopsy said that they had determined her cause of death to be strangulation. The day after Gabby's family held a press conference, Brian's parents called 911 to report their son is missing. A search began on September 18 in the Carlton Reserve, a nature preserve in Venice Beach with a hiking trail. While the search for Brian continued in Florida, authorities in Wyoming issued a federal arrest warrant for him. The warrant wasn't concerning Gabby's death, but because Brian had used her credit card and PIN number on his way back to Florida between August 30 and September 1. Throughout the first weeks of October, Brian remained missing as searches for him continued across Florida. Brian had extensive knowledge of the outdoors, and many people thought he could survive on his own on the trail. Brian's parents called Northport Police and told them that they had planned to search the reserve the following day. Northport police officers joined the Laundries on their search, and finally, after weeks of searching, on October 20, 2021, Brian's decomposing remains were discovered in the Carlton Reserve. Brian's cause of death was a gunshot wound to his head. Investigators believe they hadn't found his body earlier in their search because of flooding in the area. A soaked notebook was discovered alongside Brian's body, which the investigators said they hoped to recover. In January 2022, the FBI announced they were officially closing the investigation into Gabby Petito's murder and released an official timeline of her death. In June 2022, the contents of the notebook found with Brian's body were released. Brian wrote that he had no choice but to kill Gabby after she suffered a head wound in the mountains. He said Gabby's death was a mercy killing. While in the mountains in Wyoming, Gabby fell and hit her head. She was in pain and slowly dying, and Brian mercifully strangled her to death to relieve her discomfort. Gabby's family created the Gabby Petito Foundation following her murder. The foundation supports charities for domestic violence victims, where they provide information and education to those that need it. 2 scholarships are also offered to creative high school students at Gabby's high school.